In the cold, unforgiving glare of flashing police lights, a story of power, prejudice, and identity is about to unfold. We've all seen the videos. We've all heard the stories. A traffic stop that feels wrong from the start. But this isn't just another statistic. This is the story of two Baltimore cops whose arrogant laughter would echo in the halls of justice before being silenced by a single, earth-shattering revelation. They thought they had cornered a nobody, a man to mock and belittle. They had no idea they were looking into the eyes of the most powerful lawman in the country. This is the story of how their worst night became a defining moment for the nation, and how karma came calling, not with a whisper, but with the full force of the United States government. The rain fell in relentless, slanting sheets, turning the affluent suburban streets of Roland Park, Baltimore, into a slick, black mirror reflecting the opulent glow of Tudor-style homes. It was just after 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. For Marcus Thorne, the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers was a hypnotic metronome, counting down the last few miles of a grueling 17-hour day. His suit jacket was draped over the passenger seat of his leased Lincoln Continental. The knot of his tie loosened, his mind a whirlwind of classified briefings, interagency squabbles, and the crushing weight of a new immense responsibility. He was 48 years old, a career prosecutor who had climbed the ladder at the Department of Justice with a reputation for being methodical, unshakable, and impeccably discreet. So discreet, in fact, that his recent confirmation as the new director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation had been a quiet affair, a strategic move by President Armstrong's administration to avoid a political circus. The public announcement was scheduled for Friday, a mere 3 days away. Until then, he was a ghost, a powerful man operating in the shadows of transition, meeting with station chiefs and national security advisors in clandestine, late-night sessions like the one he had just left. He slowed the Lincoln to a crawl, squinting to read a street sign obscured by the deluge. That's when the world behind him exploded in a strobing torrent of red and blue. For a heartbeat, his mind, conditioned by years of high-stakes threat assessments, raced through possibilities. A tail? A security threat? But the vehicle that emerged from the rain-soaked darkness was a standard Baltimore Police Department cruiser. He felt a familiar, weary knot tighten in his stomach, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, but one that no amount of success or status could ever fully erase. He signaled, pulled the heavy car to a smooth stop at the curb, killed the engine, and placed his hands visibly on the top of the steering wheel. He knew the drill. Two figures emerged from the cruiser, their silhouettes distorted by the rain and the blinding headlights. One was barrel-chested and moved with the slow, deliberate swagger of a man who owned the pavement he walked on. The other was younger, leaner, and quicker, almost jogging to keep up, a sharp rap on the driver's side window. Marcus powered it down, and a blast of cold, wet air filled the car. The face that greeted him was fleshy and grizzled, framed by a soaked police cap. The officer's name tag read Miller. "Evening," Officer Miller grunted, his voice a low rumble. He played his flashlight beam across Marcus's face, into his eyes, then around the pristine leather interior of the car. "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, officer, I don't," Marcus replied, his tone even and calm. He'd learned long ago that in these moments, absolute control was his only shield. "You were driving 10 miles an hour in a 25 zone, crawling along like you're casing the place," Miller said, his eyes narrowing. "This is a nice car for this neighborhood. A little too nice, maybe. License and registration?" Marcus moved with practiced slowness, narrating his actions. "I'm reaching into my jacket on the passenger seat for my wallet." He retrieved his wallet and the registration from the glove box, handing them over. Miller snatched them. He wiped a hand across his wet face and glanced at the driver's license. "Marcus Thorne. You live over in Guilford?" "That's correct, officer." "Long way from home to be driving so slow, Mr. Thorne." The second officer, whose tag read Riley, chimed in from behind Miller. Riley was younger, his face still holding a hint of nervous energy, a man eager to follow his senior partner's lead. Miller ignored him, his focus entirely on Marcus. He held up the license, then shined the light back in Marcus's face. "You look a little tense, Marcus. Got something in the car you don't want us to see? The question was a classic fishing expedition, a conversational crowbar designed to pry open a crack of fear or uncertainty. Marcus had used similar tactics himself in interrogation rooms, but from this side, it felt different. It felt like a trap being laid. "No, officer, I have nothing to hide," Marcus said. "I was just tired, trying to read the street signs in the rain. It's been a long day." Miller chuckled, a humorless, grating sound. "A long day," he says. "I'll bet. What kind of work you do, Marcus, that gets you a car like this and a house in Guilford?" The use of his first name was deliberate, a subtle stripping away of respect, a tool of casual dominance. Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second. His official cover, for the purpose of his transitional security detail, was Special Advisor to the Attorney General. It was technically true but intentionally vague. "I'm an attorney for the federal government," he stated simply. This drew a full-throated laugh from Miller. He turned to Riley, who offered a sycophantic smirk in return. "An attorney? Hear that, Kev? We got ourselves a regular Johnny Cochran here. A federal attorney, no less." He turned back to Marcus, his smile vanishing, replaced by a cold, hard mask of authority. "Step out of the car, please, sir." "Officer, am I being detained? What is the probable cause for asking me to exit my vehicle?" Marcus's voice remained level, betraying none of the cold anger simmering beneath the surface. Miller's eyes glinted. He had his hook. "Failure to obey a lawful order from a police officer is cause enough. Now I'm not going to ask you again. Step out of the car." Marcus Thorne, the man who had stared down cartel bosses and dismantled international espionage rings, took a slow, deep breath. He knew this was no longer a traffic stop. It was a confrontation, a dangerous game of power on a dark, rain-swept street. And for now, he was on the losing side. He unbuckled his seatbelt and pushed the door open. The cold Baltimore rain began to soak his $1,000 suit. The moment Marcus's polished dress shoes hit the wet asphalt, the dynamic shifted from tense to hostile. Officer Miller seemed to swell in the humid air, a predator who had just forced his prey out into the open. "Hands on the roof of the car. Spread 'em," Miller barked, his voice sharp with command. Marcus complied without a word, placing his palms flat on the cold, wet roof of the Lincoln. He could feel the rain seeping through the shoulders of his shirt. He stared at his own distorted reflection in the rain-beaded paint, his face illuminated by the relentless strobing of the police lights. He felt Riley's hands pat him down, professionally at first, then with a lingering, unnecessary firmness around his pockets and waist. "He's clean," Riley announced. "Of course he's clean," Miller scoffed, walking around to the passenger side and yanking the door open. He began to rifle through the contents of the car, his movements careless and dismissive. He tossed Marcus's suit jacket onto the wet seat and rummaged through the glove compartment. "Officer, you don't have my consent to search my vehicle," Marcus stated, his voice tight but controlled. Miller paused and slowly turned, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "Your car matches the description of a vehicle reported for suspicious activity in this area about 20 minutes ago. That's my probable cause. So I'd advise you to shut your mouth, Mr. Attorney, before I find a reason to add obstruction to your list of problems tonight." It was a lie, and Marcus knew it. A perfectly constructed, boilerplate lie that would be nearly impossible for a civilian to disprove on the side of the road at 2 a.m. It was Miller's world, and he was just a player in it. Inside the car, Miller's search became more invasive. He pulled out a leather briefcase from the passenger footwell. It was locked with a small, high-security combination lock. Well, what do we have here?" Miller said, his voice dripping with theatrical suspicion. "A locked briefcase. What are you hiding in here, Marcus? The secret recipe to your grandma's sweet potato pie?" Riley snickered on cue. "That's official government property," Marcus said, his voice hardening for the first time. "You are not authorized to open it." "Oh, government property," Miller mocked, holding the briefcase up as if it were a prop. "Everything's getting real serious now. Kev, you feel that? The gravity of the situation? We're dealing with a real G-man here." He placed the briefcase on the hood of his cruiser and returned to Marcus. "I'm going to need you to open this." "I will not." You will, or I'll impound the car and the briefcase and get a warrant in the morning. Your choice. But I can tell you, the judges around here don't take kindly to people who waste our time. Marcus stood in the rain, a cold fury building within him. The briefcase contained his transition notes, classified documents outlining personnel changes, and covert operational priorities for the Bureau. If Miller, in his oafish attempt at intimidation, were to damage the lock or expose the contents, it would constitute a significant security breach. The irony was suffocating. He weighed his options. He could continue to refuse, leading to an arrest and a bureaucratic nightmare. Or he could play along, endure the humiliation, and deal with the consequences from a position of power later. He chose the latter. The long game was the only game that mattered. The combination is 925, he said, the numbers tasting like ash in his mouth. With a triumphant smirk, Miller opened the briefcase. He expected to find drugs, cash, or something illicit. Instead, he was met with meticulously organized folders, their tabs bearing acronyms he didn't recognize: SCI, DOJNSD, CTD brief. He pulled one out. The cover page was stark, stamped with bold red letters. Top secret, just no foreign. For a moment, Miller's bravado flickered. He'd been a cop for 22 years. He knew what that stamp meant. But his ego, stoked by Riley's presence and his own deep-seated prejudice, refused to let him back down. He couldn't have been wrong about this guy. A man like this, in a car like this, in this neighborhood. It didn't add up. The documents had to be fake. "Look at this, Kev," Miller said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Our boy here likes to play spy. Got his own fake government documents and everything. You print these out at Kinko's, Marcus?" Marcus remained silent, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Miller, sensing he was losing control of the narrative, slammed the briefcase shut. He'd found nothing, and it infuriated him. "All right, I'm done wasting my time with you. I'm writing you a ticket for impeding traffic, and a warning for the suspicious activity. You're lucky that's all you're getting." He scribbled on his ticket pad, tore the sheet off with a flourish, and thrust it at Marcus. "Now get out of my neighborhood and go back to wherever you came from." As Marcus got back into his car, soaked and seething, Miller leaned in through the window one last time. "And hey, counselor," he sneered, "next time you want to play dress-up, try a mailman's uniform. It's more believable." The two officers laughed as they walked back to their cruiser, the sound swallowed by the rain. Marcus Thorne watched them go, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The ticket for impeding traffic was a triviality. The search, the mockery, the blatant abuse of power, that was something else entirely. It was a debt, and Marcus Thorne always saw that debts were paid in full. He didn't go home. He drove to the nearest 24-hour pharmacy, bought a cheap prepaid phone, and made a single call. "This is Thorne," he said, his voice low and steady. "I need to move up the timeline, activate my full security protocol, and arrange a secure line to Attorney General Ramirez immediately, and get me the service records and complaint histories for 2 Baltimore patrolmen, Miller, David, and Riley, Kevin. I want everything, by sunrise." The game had just begun. 2 days later, the rain had been replaced by a pale, indifferent sun. Marcus Thorne sat on a hard wooden bench in the city's district traffic court. It was a cattle call of human frustration, a chaotic symphony of ringing phones, coughing, and the droning voice of the bailiff calling out docket numbers. He was wearing a simple off-the-rack charcoal suit, a deliberate choice to appear unremarkable. He had waived his right to an attorney, a decision that had baffled the public defender who had offered his services. He had spent the last 48 hours in a whirlwind of activity, but not on this case. He had been officially sworn in as director in a private ceremony with the president, the public announcement now set for that very afternoon. He had briefed congressional oversight committees and authorized a sensitive counterintelligence operation in Eastern Europe. Yet here he sat, waiting to contest a $90 traffic ticket, an absurdity that felt both surreal and absolutely necessary. The file on Officers Miller and Riley was thick. Miller had a history of lost body cam footage and a string of racially biased stop complaints, all dismissed with insufficient evidence. Riley was a clean slate, a rookie with only 18 months on the force, a follower. Docket 73B, Marcus Thorne, impeding traffic, the bailiff called. Marcus stood and walked to the defendant's table. Across the small courtroom, he saw them. Miller and Riley were leaning against the far wall, decked out in their dress uniforms. Miller caught his eye and gave him a slow, mocking wink. He whispered something to Riley, and they both broke into wide, arrogant grins, laughing audibly enough for the judge to rap her gavel. "Order," Judge Annabelle Soto said, her voice sharp. She was a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, known for her impatience with time-wasters. "Mr. Thorne, you are contesting this citation? You are representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice calm and clear, filling the room. "And you are Officers Miller and Riley?" the judge asked, looking over her spectacles at the two cops. "Yes, Your Honor," Miller said, striding forward with confidence. Riley followed a step behind, looking slightly less assured under the judge's stern gaze. "Officer Miller, please state the circumstances of the citation," Judge Soto instructed, already looking bored. Miller launched into his well-rehearsed, perjured account. "Your Honor, at approximately 200 hours on Tuesday morning, Officer Riley and I observed the defendant's vehicle traveling at an unusually low rate of speed, approximately 10 miles per hour, in a residential zone. The driver was weaving slightly, suggesting possible intoxication or that he was casing the neighborhood, which has seen a recent spike in property crime. We initiated a traffic stop for the safety of the public. The defendant was argumentative and uncooperative, so a citation was issued for impeding the flow of traffic. It was a masterful piece of fiction, painting Marcus as a potential criminal and himself as a vigilant protector of the peace." Judge Soto turned to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, your response?" This was the moment. Theatrics were not his style. Facts were his weapon. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice steady, "my response is that Officer Miller's testimony is not only inaccurate, but constitutes a deliberate falsehood under oath, and his conduct during the stop, along with Officer Riley's, was not a legitimate exercise of police authority, but a gross and prejudicial abuse of it." A murmur went through the small gallery. Miller's face flushed with anger. Riley shifted his weight, his eyes darting between Marcus and the judge. "Those are very serious allegations, Mr. Thorne," Judge Soto said, her eyebrows raised. "Do you have any evidence to support them? A witness? A video recording?" "I have something better, Your Honor," Marcus said. "I have context." He took a step forward, his gaze locking with Miller's across the room. The officer's smug confidence was beginning to fray, replaced by a hostile curiosity. "Officer Miller testified that he pulled me over for public safety. Yet his first line of questioning was not about my sobriety, but about my presence in the neighborhood and my profession. He and Officer Riley then conducted an illegal search of my vehicle, based on the fabricated pretense that my car matched the description of a suspicious vehicle, a report which I can assure the court does not exist." "Objection!" the city prosecutor, a young, overwhelmed man, finally piped up. "The defendant is making unsubstantiated claims about the officer's conduct." "I will substantiate them presently," Marcus said, not waiting for the judge. He turned his attention back to Judge Soto. "During this illegal search, the officers mocked my profession. They temporarily seized a locked briefcase containing sensitive national security documents, which they forced me to open." Miller burst out laughing. It was a loud, derisive bark that echoed in the courtroom. "National security documents. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. This guy is a joke. He claimed to be a federal attorney, and now he's claiming he's James Bond. He's wasting everyone's time." Riley joined in with a nervous titter, the laughter of a man following his partner's lead, even as a knot of dread began to form in his own stomach. Judge Soto banged her gavel hard. "Order! I will have order! Officer Miller, control yourself. Mr. Thorne, you are on thin ice. You will present concrete proof of these wild claims, or I will hold you in contempt of this court." The room was silent, the air thick with tension. The laughter had sealed their fate. They saw him as a joke. It was time to deliver the punchline. "My apologies, Your Honor," Marcus said with a chilling calm. "You are correct. I should be more precise. My official title is not merely federal attorney. He paused, letting the silence stretch, drawing every eye in the room to him. He looked at Miller and Riley, whose smirks were now frozen on their faces. When these officers pulled me over 2 nights ago, I was returning from a classified security briefing at Fort Meade. The documents they so cavalierly handled contained operational directives for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They mocked me because they could not conceive that a man who looks like me could hold any real power. They laughed at the idea of me being a federal employee of some importance. He stood up straighter, his voice dropping slightly, but gaining an unmistakable edge of absolute authority. So, to be perfectly clear for the court record, my name is Marcus A. Thorne, and as of 8 a.m. yesterday morning, by executive order of the President of the United States, I am the sworn and confirmed director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The city prosecutor's jaw dropped. Judge Soto's eyes widened in stunned disbelief. But the most profound change was in the 2 officers. Riley's face went bone white, the color draining from it as if a plug had been pulled. He looked like he was going to be sick. Miller's laughter died in his throat, replaced by a choked, rasping sound. His face contorted, a mask of utter, uncomprehending horror. The floor had just vanished from beneath his feet. The man they had mocked, threatened, and humiliated on a rainy street corner was not just an attorney. He was, in that moment, the most powerful law enforcement officer in the entire country. The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing weight that held everyone in place. It was the sound of 2 careers and 2 lives ending. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the courtroom was the frantic beat of Officer Kevin Riley's heart in his own ears. Judge Soto stared at Marcus, her mind struggling to process the information. She had seen countless defendants try outlandish tactics, but this was different. The calm, unwavering certainty in Marcus Thorne's eyes held no hint of delusion or deceit. Slowly, deliberately, Judge Soto leaned forward. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is this some kind of joke?" Before Marcus could answer, the main doors of the courtroom burst open. 2 men in dark, severe suits entered, their movements sharp and purposeful. They were flanked by a flustered-looking Baltimore police chief, Michael Harrison, whose face was pale and beaded with sweat. "Your Honor, I apologize for the intrusion," one of the men said, his voice carrying the clipped, authoritative tone of a federal agent. He flashed an ID badge. "Special Agent in Charge, David Chen, FBI Baltimore Field Office. We're here for Director Thorne." The confirmation sent a second shockwave through the room. It was real. All of it. Chief Harrison looked like a man who had just been told his house was on fire. He rushed toward the bench. "Judge Soto, Your Honor, there has been a terrible misunderstanding." Judge Soto ignored him. Her gaze was fixed on Miller and Riley. The transformation in the 2 men was terrifying to behold. Riley was visibly trembling, his hands shaking so badly he had to grip the railing in front of him. Miller, however, was a statue of pure rage and disbelief. His face was a mottled red, his fists clenched at his sides. He was trapped, cornered, and his only instinct was to lash out. "It's a lie, a setup!" Miller suddenly roared, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "He's some kind of deep state plant. You can't believe this. We're good cops." Special Agent Chen took a half-step forward, his hand instinctively moving toward his jacket, but Marcus held up a single, placating finger. He didn't even look at Miller. His attention was still on the judge. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice cutting through Miller's frantic outburst, "I believe the matter of the $90 traffic ticket can be dismissed. However, we now have the more serious issues of perjury, official misconduct, illegal search and seizure, and a potential violation of federal law regarding the mishandling of classified materials. I would ask that U.S. Marshals be assigned to escort Officers Miller and Riley from this courtroom. They are a flight risk and a potential threat to the integrity of the forthcoming investigation." "Investigation?" Chief Harrison stammered. "Director Thorne, I can assure you, Baltimore PD Internal Affairs will handle this. We will get to the bottom of it." Marcus finally turned his gaze to the police chief. It was a cold, dissecting look that made the seasoned chief flinch. "Chief Harrison, With all due respect, your department's Internal Affairs Division has had Officer Miller's file on their desk multiple times. They have failed to act on a clear pattern of behavior. Therefore, they have forfeited the privilege of investigating this matter. This will be handled by the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, effective immediately. He then looked at Miller and Riley. Officers Miller and Riley, you are hereby instructed to surrender your service weapons and badges to your chief. Riley fumbled at his belt with palsied hands, his badge clattering to the floor as he tried to unclip it. He looked utterly broken. Miller did not move. He just stared at Marcus, his chest heaving, his face a mask of hate. You think you can just come in here and do this? He hissed. I'm not doing anything, Marcus replied, his voice devoid of emotion. I am merely holding up a mirror. Everything that happens now is a reflection of your own actions. Two U.S. Marshals, who had entered discreetly behind the FBI agents, stepped forward. They moved with an unnerving quietness. One placed a firm hand on Miller's shoulder. The contact seemed to shatter Miller's paralysis. With a guttural scream of rage, he tried to shove the marshal away. It was a futile effort. In seconds, both Miller and Riley were professionally, forcefully restrained. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was deafeningly loud in the stunned silence of the courtroom. As they were led away, Miller was still shouting, a torrent of curses and threats, his tough guy facade crumbling into a pathetic display of impotent fury. Riley was silent, his head bowed in shame, tears streaming down his face. His career, his reputation, his entire life had been detonated by 20 minutes of casual cruelty on a rainy night. Marcus Thorne stood at the defendant's table, watching them go. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound and heavy sense of purpose. He walked over to the prosecutor's table and placed the ticket Miller had written him on its surface. For the record, he said, his voice just loud enough for the judge and the court stenographer to hear. The citation was for impeding traffic, but I was not the one standing in the way of progress. The system was. He then turned and walked out of the courtroom, flanked by his security detail, leaving behind a scene of utter chaos and the beginning of a story that would soon grip the entire nation. The news hit the media like a lightning strike. New FBI director caught in BPD profiling scandal on eve of announcement. It was the lead story on every major network by lunchtime. The official White House press conference, intended to be a celebratory introduction of Marcus Thorne, was transformed into a crisis management session. Marcus himself was a phantom. He made no public statement, refused all interviews, and retreated behind the imposing walls of the J. Edgar Hoover building. He was not interested in becoming a media martyr or a symbol. He was interested in wielding the vast power he now commanded. His first official act as director was not to fire anyone, but to request a meeting with Attorney General Hector Ramirez. The AG, a sharp, politically savvy man who had championed Marcus for the director position, found him not in the sprawling director's office, but in a small, sterile conference room, a stack of files in front of him. This is a political nightmare, Marcus, Ramirez said, forgoing any pleasantries. The president is livid. The BPD union is already screaming about a witch hunt. We need to control this narrative. The narrative is the least of my concerns, Marcus replied, pushing a file across the table. It was Miller's jacket. This is 14 civilian complaints in 10 years, 7 for excessive force, 5 for racial profiling, 2 for illegal searches, all of them closed. No disciplinary action beyond a verbal warning in 2018. He pushed a second file over. This is the demographic breakdown of Officer Miller's traffic stops for the last 3 years. 92% were issued to African American and Hispanic drivers, despite the fact his patrol zones are, on average, 60% white. This isn't a narrative, Hector. It's a mathematical certainty. The man uses his badge as a weapon against people of color. Ramirez sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't disagree, but a full DOJ investigation, it's a declaration of war on the Baltimore Police Department. It's a declaration of principle, Marcus corrected him. I didn't ask for this fight. Officer Miller brought it to my doorstep. He and Officer Riley weren't just unprofessional. They were a symptom of a disease. If I let this go, if I accept a quiet apology from the chief and allow them to quietly fire these two men, then what message does that send? That the system only works for you if you happen to be the director of the FBI? No. The system has to work for everyone, or it works for no one. The Attorney General was silent for a long moment. He saw the iron resolve in Marcus's eyes. This wasn't about revenge. It was about a mandate. "What do you need?" Ramirez finally asked. "A lead prosecutor from the Civil Rights Division with an appetite for a fight. Full subpoena power. And I want access to Baltimore PD's unedited body camera servers. All of them. I suspect what happened to me was not an isolated incident." Meanwhile, in Baltimore, the storm had made landfall. Miller and Riley had been suspended without pay, pending the outcome of the federal investigation. They were pariahs. Their fellow officers, who might have privately supported them, were keeping their distance, terrified of being swept up in the federal dragnet. The infamous blue wall of silence was beginning to crumble under the weight of the FBI's involvement. For David Miller, this was an unbearable humiliation. He wasn't a criminal. He was a cop. In his mind, he had done nothing wrong. He'd hassled a mouthy suspect who turned out to be connected. It was just bad luck. Locked away in his small suburban home, with reporters camped out on his lawn, his anger began to curdle into a dangerous, self-righteous paranoia. He hired a lawyer, a pit bull from the police union named Jerry Klein, who immediately went on the offensive. He appeared on a popular conservative news network, The Sentinel, and painted a picture of a dedicated veteran police officer being crushed by the heel of a vindictive, newly appointed D.C. bureaucrat. "This isn't about justice," Klein thundered to the network's host. "This is a political hit job. Director Thorne was embarrassed, and now he's using the full, terrifying power of the federal government to destroy a good cop's life over a simple traffic ticket." The narrative began to take hold in certain corners of the internet. Stand with Miller started trending. A crowdfunding page for his legal defense raised over $100,000 in 2 days. Miller, watching from his living room, felt a surge of vindication. He wasn't alone. He was a hero, a victim. He would fight this. For Kevin Riley, the experience was vastly different. There was no self-righteous anger, only a bottomless well of shame and fear. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the cold, controlled fury in Marcus Thorne's face. He heard the derisive laughter, his own laughter, echoing in the courtroom. His wife, Sarah, tried to be supportive at first, but his silent, hollowed-out presence was a constant strain. "Why, Kevin?" she had asked him, her voice breaking after watching the news for the 10th time. "Why did you just stand there? Why did you laugh?" He had no answer. Because he was scared? Because he wanted Miller to like him? Because in that moment, he had let the ugliest part of himself, the part that he always pretended wasn't there, take the wheel. The excuses felt pathetic and weak. A week after the incident, 2 FBI agents from the DOJ's investigative team arrived at his door. They were polite, professional, and utterly intimidating. They didn't come to arrest him. They came to offer him a choice. Officer Riley, the lead agent, a woman named Isabella Rossi, said calmly, "We have the body camera footage. We have the dash cam audio. We have Officer Miller's entire sordid history. We are building a federal civil rights case against him that he will not win. Right now, you are his co-conspirator. You stood by. You participated. You are culpable." She slid a business card across his kitchen table. "But you have an opportunity to change that. You can be a witness for the prosecution. Tell us everything that happened that night. Tell us everything you know about Miller's habits. Cooperate fully, and the U.S. Attorney's Office will take that cooperation into consideration when filing charges. Or you can stand with him, and you will fall with him." The agents left. The business card sat on the table, a small white rectangle that represented the only possible path out of the abyss. But taking it meant betraying his partner, betraying the badge, betraying the unspoken code he had sworn to uphold. That night, Kevin Riley sat in his dark living room, the card in his hand, the choice tearing him apart. He knew what he had to do. The question was whether he had the courage to do it. David Miller was not a man given to introspection. He saw the world in stark, simple terms. Cops and criminals, us and them. In his narrative, he was the hero, and the forces arrayed against him were the villains. Fueled by the support from online trolls and the combative rhetoric of his lawyer, He decided to double down. His strategy was to discredit the director himself. With the help of a sympathetic retired detective, he started digging into Marcus Thorne's past, looking for any dirt he could find. He leaked tidbits to right-wing bloggers, Thorne's soft-on-crime prosecution record in certain cases, his membership in a college organization that had protested police brutality. It was a smear campaign designed to muddy the waters and reframe the incident as a political grudge. The centerpiece of his defense was the body camera footage. His lawyer, Jerry Klein, filed a motion demanding its public release, confident it would show a by-the-book traffic stop of an uncooperative individual. What the footage will prove, Klein announced at an impromptu press conference on the courthouse steps, is that my client acted professionally in a tense situation. The so-called mocking was simply two partners trying to de-escalate with a bit of gallows humor. This was a colossal gamble, but Miller was certain it would pay off. He remembered the stop clearly, in his own filtered way. He remembered being firm, but fair. He didn't remember the venom in his own voice, the casual cruelty, the glee he took in humiliating the man in the expensive car. The human mind has a powerful capacity for self-deception. Meanwhile, Kevin Riley was living in a self-imposed prison of guilt. He had stopped answering his phone. His wife, Sarah, had taken their young daughter and gone to stay with her sister. The silence in his house was a physical presence, pressing in on him. The business card from Agent Rossi sat on his nightstand, a constant, silent accusation. He spent his days replaying the traffic stop over and over in his head. But unlike Miller, he remembered it with sickening clarity. He remembered the rain, the way Thorne had remained unnaturally calm, the sneer on Miller's face, and his own stupid, nervous laughter. He had stood there and done nothing. Worse, he had participated. He had validated his partner's ugliness with his own silence and compliance. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. He was watching the news when Jerry Klein came on, defending Miller. Officer Riley stands 100% behind his partner, Klein declared confidently. He will testify that this was a legitimate stop and that Director Thorne is exaggerating the events for political gain. Hearing his name used to prop up Miller's lies made something inside Riley snap. He felt a surge of nausea. He was being made into an accomplice in a lie that was being broadcast to the entire country. He was being erased, his own perspective, his own guilt, completely ignored. He picked up the phone and dialed the number on Rossi's card. "Agent Rossi," he said, his voice hoarse. "This is Kevin Riley. I need to talk to you. I'll tell you everything." The meeting took place in a bland, anonymous office building downtown. For 3 hours, with a federal prosecutor present, Riley recounted every detail of the stop. He didn't spare himself. He talked about the culture in the precinct, how senior officers like Miller were seen as untouchable, how rookies were expected to fall in line. He confessed that he knew the stop was pretextual from the moment Miller hit the lights. "Why did he pull him over?" Agent Rossi asked, her voice neutral. Riley stared at his hands. "Because he was a black man in a nice car in a rich neighborhood, and Dave didn't think he belonged there. That's it. That's the whole reason." He then gave them something they didn't have. After the stop, back in the cruiser, Miller had been gloating, and Miller, ever the narcissist, had a habit of leaving his body camera running to capture his war stories. The official BPD server automatically stopped uploads after a certain period post-incident, but the raw data often remained on the device's internal memory card for a few hours before being overwritten. The DOJ had impounded the camera, but hadn't yet done a deep-level forensic dive. Riley's testimony gave them the probable cause to do it. "He laughed about it," Riley recounted, his voice thick with shame. "See how you handle guys like that, Kev," he said. "You gotta let him know who's in charge. Make him feel small." He was proud of it. When the interview was over, Riley felt hollowed out, but also strangely light. He had finally told the truth. He had no idea what would happen to him. He would likely still face charges, lose his job, his pension, but he had severed himself from Miller's lie. The DOJ forensics team, acting on Riley's tip, retrieved the extended footage from Miller's camera. It was everything Riley had said and more. It was the smoking gun. Back in Washington, Marcus Thorne was briefed on the development. He listened intently as the prosecutor detailed Riley's confession and the existence of the damning after-action audio. Miller's lawyer is still demanding the release of the footage, the prosecutor noted. He thinks it's his ace in the hole. A rare, grim smile touched Marcus Thorne's lips. Then we will give it to him. We will give it to the world. Let him have his public hearing. Let everyone see the unedited, unvarnished truth of what men like him do when they think no one is watching. The stage was set for the final act. David Miller, champion of the common cop, was about to be devoured by his own hubris, live and in high definition. The federal courtroom was packed. This wasn't a trial, but a preliminary hearing on the DOJ's civil rights case against Officer David Miller. The media was there in force, drawn by the explosive combination of race, power, and policing. Miller sat at the defense table, looking confident. He had become a minor celebrity in the right-wing media ecosystem, a symbol of the persecuted cop. He believed his own hype. He was going to win. Kevin Riley was not in the courtroom. He was in a secure witness room waiting. His plea deal had been finalized. He would plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge of official misconduct and resign from the force. And in exchange for his full and truthful testimony, he would avoid federal prison time. His life as a police officer was over, but he had a chance to build a new one. The DOJ's lead prosecutor, a formidable woman named Alana Washington, stood to address the court. Your Honor, the defense has repeatedly demanded the public release of the body camera footage from the night in question, claiming it will exonerate Mr. Miller. The government agrees. We believe the public has a right to see the events as they transpired. Jerry Klein, Miller's lawyer, beamed. He had won. He had forced the government's hand. We will play two pieces of footage, Washington continued. First, the dash cam footage from Officer Miller's vehicle, which provides a wide view of the entire stop. Second, the full, unedited recording from Officer Miller's own body-worn camera, including the audio recorded in his vehicle immediately following his interaction with Director Thorne. At the mention of the extended audio, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Miller's face. He glanced at his lawyer, who gave him a reassuring nod, though Klein himself felt a sudden pang of anxiety. The courtroom lights dimmed, and the large screen on the wall came to life. The dash cam footage played first. It showed the Lincoln pulling over smoothly, Marcus Thorne exiting the car as instructed, his hands always visible, his posture non-threatening. It completely contradicted Miller's initial report of an uncooperative and argumentative suspect. Then came the body cam footage. The audio was crystal clear. The courtroom heard Miller's condescending tone, his baseless accusations. They heard him use Marcus's first name with casual disrespect. They heard the lie about the car matching a description of a suspicious vehicle. They heard the forced entry into the briefcase. And they heard the laughter, the arrogant, dismissive laughter from both Miller and Riley. The air in the courtroom grew heavy and cold. The reporters scribbled furiously. Miller's confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a pallid, sweaty sheen. Then came the final, damning piece. The footage shifted to the inside of the police cruiser after they had driven away. Miller was behind the wheel, a triumphant look on his face. "See how you handle guys like that, Kev?" His voice boomed through the courtroom speakers, filled with smug satisfaction. "You gotta let him know who's in charge. Make him feel small. That little speech he gave about being a federal attorney? Pathetic. I almost locked him up just for the fun of it. He'll think twice next time he drives through my neighborhood looking like that." The camera then caught Riley's reflection in the passenger window. He was silent, staring out at the rain, his expression uneasy even then. "You seem quiet," Miller's voice said. "Don't go soft on me, kid. That's how we keep these streets clean. We put the fear of God in them." When the screen went black, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a silence of total condemnation. In his own words on his own camera, David Miller had confessed to everything. He had admitted his motive was not public safety, but intimidation. He had admitted his actions were designed to make him feel small. He had laid bare the ugly, racist truth of the encounter. Jerry Klein sat stunned, his face ashen. His client hadn't just given the prosecution a smoking gun. He had handed them a fully loaded cannon. His entire defense, his entire public narrative, had been obliterated in 90 seconds of tape. Miller was staring at the blank screen, his mouth slightly agape. He looked like a man who had just watched his own execution. The hero of the persecuted had been exposed as a common bully and a perjurer. Alana Washington let the silence hang in the air for a dramatic beat before speaking. "The evidence," she said simply, "speaks for itself." The hearing was a formality after that. The judge found overwhelming probable cause to proceed with the federal charges. As Miller was led out of the courtroom, no longer swaggering but shuffling, he was met not by supporters, but by a wall of cameras and reporters shouting questions. "Did you lie, officer? Was the stop racially motivated? Do you have a comment on your own words?" He looked broken, a man drowning in the consequences of his own hatred. The karma was not mystical or instantaneous. It was methodical, grinding, and absolute. David Miller was convicted on 2 federal counts: deprivation of rights under color of law and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 36 months in federal prison. He lost his job, his pension, his reputation, and the respect of his family. He went from being the enforcer to being the inmate, a fate he had callously imposed on so many others. Kevin Riley served 6 months of probation and performed 500 hours of community service. He and his wife reconciled, and he found work as a dispatcher in a neighboring state, his life forever marked by his moment of moral failure, but also by his ultimate decision to tell the truth. Marcus Thorne never spoke publicly about the incident again. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken for him. He initiated a sweeping program within the FBI to assist local police departments in reforming their training and accountability protocols. He used the power he had almost been denied to ensure that what happened to him on that rainy Baltimore night would be less likely to happen to anyone else. His justice was not personal revenge, it was systemic reform. The laughter had long since faded, replaced by the quiet, difficult work of building a more just world. The story of Director Thorne and the 2 officers isn't just a tale of a shocking twist of fate. It's a powerful testament to the idea that karma isn't just some abstract cosmic force. It is the tangible, real-world consequence that catches up to us when we abuse power and betray the trust placed in us. For Officers Miller and Riley, their laughter in the dark was an echo of a systemic problem, but the reckoning that followed was swift, personal, and absolute. They learned that the person you disrespect today might hold the keys to your future tomorrow, and that true authority is not about the badge you wear, but the character you show. If this story of justice and accountability resonated with you, and you believe that stories like this need to be heard, please take a moment to hit that like button and share this video with others. Subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into stories that matter. And I want to hear from you. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.